What's up, fellas? It's a great freaking day to be alive. Time for Wake Up Mintzy, presented by Dude Wipes and Stella Blue. It's like 80 degrees in Chicago today in late October. I don't know what the hell's going on, but there's good energy in the air. I'm fired up to be here. A lot of stuff to get into today, as always, and fun guest today, man. Super pumped. We're joined right now off the top by Jim Nagy, head of the Reese's Senior Bowl. And Jim, what's up? Good morning. How are you?
Good, man. I saw you got your run in already this morning, man. So let's talk some football.
Yeah, man. Well, yeah, I'm hopping. I feel like I'm like bouncing off walls today. Like I woke up, got my 3.25 mile run in, had like a good weigh in at like 2:43, making some progress. Let's go. And then you're a man after my own heart with the Ole Miss and Saints helmets behind you there, even though the way the season started for both, the way they're going, where they've headed lately, it's been a roller coaster. But how are you? You join us from Mobile?
Yeah, man. It's if it's 80 degrees in Chicago, you can imagine what it's like down here on the Gulf Coast. It is. We've been hitting record highs like the last week. We're like hovering in the low 90s. We got a taste of fall a couple weeks ago, where it dipped down into the 50s in the morning, and we get up into the low 80s. But man, it has been. It still feels like summer down here, but it certainly doesn't feel like football weather. But we're getting through it.
Yeah, well. Just for everyone familiar with Stoolies, Jim's the head of the Reese's Senior Bowl. And how long have you've been doing this for quite a while, right?
Yeah. It's been 7 years. It's gone by pretty fast. Yeah, 7 years. So I was in the NFL for 20 years scouting, and then we lived in Mobile. My wife and I, we were raising our kids down here when I was doing the NFL thing, and then this job came open, and jumped at it. I was with the Seahawks, and I can't believe it's been 7 years, but yeah, it's been a long time.
Well, so okay, I've got a whole bunch of fun questions to ask. Okay, so the Senior Bowl is February 1st. Obviously, it's the biggest pre-draft of all the post. I guess I don't know what you call it, not postseason, but what everybody's trying
pre-draft.
out. Yeah, pre-draft. And then all the NFL coaches are down there and scouts and practicing. So I'm curious, like this time of year, what the process is like. Because you're obviously watching a ton of college football. You're calling agents, players, coaches. Are you like in the evaluation process right now of who y'all are going to invite?
Yeah, we're in the thick of it. We're really at the end of it, Mintz. We've been watching these players really since before last year's game. I mean, once we get the roster set and guys, signed up to come to Mobile, we move on to the next year. So we've looked at all the, junior and sophomore tape. We can bring juniors now. A lot of people don't know that. The NFL passed a rule. Yeah, the NFL passed a rule last year that we can bring juniors. We're not changing our name. We worked hard to develop the brand. We're going to stay the Senior Bowl. But yeah, we've watched all the tape. We've got 11 former NFL scouts on our staff this year. All over the country, so we're games. If you follow along with us on Saturdays, you can see we're everywhere. We just had our scouting staff meetings last week, wrapped those up on Friday. And, this week today, really, later today and all the way through the weekend, we are moving into a phase of our process where we call the NFL teams, and they're really like just comparing grades and sharing notes on players, and just to make sure we're bringing the guys they want to see, because this game is for them. It's a great evaluation tool for those guys. So we're just, again, we do all our own work. I think it's important we do our own work, just to bring credibility to it. And then, but then we do check it off with all the guys in the league, and hopefully we end up with the right guys. So, last year we had 110 players drafted. We had 10 first-round picks, 45 of the top 100, which was our best year in a long time. So hopefully, they didn't pass that junior rule last year until about this time. Like the first week in November, we got the call from the league that we could bring the underclassmen. And I don't think a lot of those guys were planning on Senior Bowl being a part of their process. So we didn't get a lot of those guys. We really didn't. We only ended up with about 17 or 18 juniors, and all 10 of the first rounders were seniors. So we're fired up for this year. We think we've got some, an opportunity to really make a nice jump this year in the amount of guys that are in the game.
So I'm curious about the scouting and stuff, because you're saying you're already working on 2025. I mean, obviously it's not going to come out till these seasons are over who's going to the Senior Bowl, and I get all that. But, like, basically you're done with this year is basically what you're saying. You already know who you're going to invite. You just got to, you're going to wait.
Pretty close, man. We will, invites will go out of this office next week. I don't know what that number is going to end up being. We'll see when we get off these NFL calls. Probably somewhere we'll end up with about 135, 140 players here for game week. We'll probably send around 100 out. And then I think we owe it to the players. We can't just, invite all the guys, and we can't invite the juniors until they declare. So, that's part of it, too. We got to wait that process out. But, guys get better in November. They really do. I mean, you watch some of these guys, especially the transfers, guys that are transfers into a new school or a school that has a new coach coming in. Some of these guys don't really get with the playbook and feel really comfortable playing in a scheme until later in the year. So we can't just invite everybody, next week. We're going to have to hold some spots open. But, yeah, for the most part, we'll have a good chunk of this thing done by next week.
Hey, as they say, they remember in November. One question I have is this new world of college football, and obviously Senior Bowl is all about the NFL, but how does the NIL stuff affect the Senior Bowl? Because I feel like maybe more kids and seniors come back to college now because they're getting paid a little bit. I know there's a lot of guys on Ole Miss's roster, for example, that were debating going to the NFL, but they got paid, so they came back. I mean, I guess now that y'all have juniors, it doesn't matter as much. But I feel like maybe more people are inclined to stay senior year just because they're actually getting paid for it now.
Yeah, it would have been a big deal had we not been able to get the juniors. But now it's not quite as big a deal. But you're right. No, that's been a huge difference. I mean, just at your school, Trey Harris, your stud receiver, we invited him last year, and he decided to go back to school. So. And that happened quite a bit, and I get it. I mean, the money right now being thrown around at the college level, especially for, big-time players like a Trey Harris, I mean, it's significant money. We're not talking $50,000. I mean, these guys are making really good money. So, that's affected it a little bit. And then people ask, have players been asking you guys for money, to come to the Senior Bowl? And I think they're not yet. I'll say that, not yet. But I think there's an understanding that if you come to the game, that's what this platform is all about, is showing yourself in front of all the NFL guys that you talked about. All the decision makers will be here. All the GMs, all the head coaches are down there on the field watching practice up close. We have nightly interviews and all that stuff. So they know that if they come down here and have a good week in Mobile, that they will get paid for it. It just won't be until April's draft, so there's, example after example every year of guys that come down here as, fourth or fifth round draft picks and end up as, high second round picks or late first round picks. And that's a lot of money. We certainly don't have that kind of overhead cash to be paying guys to come down here, but they do get the payout. If they come down here and perform well, they get paid out in April.
Well, so, I always, follow the Senior Bowl close. I'm trying to come down there and go this year, and hey, maybe we can get Wake Up Mintzy down there that week. My question,
awesome.
So the practice week is more important than the game, it seems like. I mean, obviously the game's the thing, and you got NFL coaches coaching. I don't know. Y'all probably announce that later, so I don't want to, spoil that. But as far as the week goes, what's that week like?
Yeah, I mean, for the players, there's a lot that goes into it, man. I mean, like you said, they got NFL coaches. They're trying to learn a playbook. They got the interviews. They got to perform. It's one thing to It's one thing to be, rolling out in Oxford or, Athens, Georgia and practice with your team. But when they're down here, man, I mean, you look over and Mike Tomlin standing 2 feet from you, watching you perform. And it's intense, man. There's a lot of anxiety for the players. And there's just a lot going on. I feel like, when I was a scout, I always loved the platform because you saw which guys could handle kind of the week. It's kind of stressful by design. That's how the NFL kind of wants it because you kind of see which guys elevate. So there's a lot going on down here. And there's a lot of fun stuff too, during the week. We credentialed over 1,200 media people last year. That was our all-time record, and over 900 NFL people. So there's the whole football world kind of descends on Mobile. I think we had 43 college head coaches come down to see practice. So it is about the practice week. I mean, that's what's on ESPN. That's what's on the NFL Network. Of course, our game's on the NFL Network too. But I don't want to take away from the importance of the game. I mean, guys that play well in the game can really help themselves. Yeah, most of the NFL guys clear out by game time. But I will say this, when they go back to the facilities, there's not a game tape that's watched more in draft rooms than the Senior Bowl game itself. I mean, we used to wear that thing out with the teams I worked at. So the whole thing's really important. But, again, we'd love to have you down, man. It's really a fun week. I mean,
yeah, a lot of my guys have been
doing it. You would get is awesome. I mean, there would be obviously we have all our players that you could have on as guests too, but then all the NFL dudes, you'd have a good time with them.
All right, I'm in. I've heard enough. I know all my guys like T-Bob Hebert and Jacob Hester and that crew from Baton Rouge was over there last year, and so I used to work with those guys. So they all said great things. Hey, Mobile, Country Club of the South, baby. I don't know if nationally people understand, and that's like right before Mardi Gras was invented in Mobile. People always forget that.
Yeah, they do, and yeah, you ask people from Mobile, man, they are pretty proud of that. So most years we fall. We pushed back in the calendar a couple years ago. When the NFL added a 17th game, we've always fallen between the conference championship games and the Super Bowl. And when they added that 17th game, we pushed back with them. And so that lands us in Mardi Gras most years. This year it doesn't. But we do a Mardi Gras parade with our players. We do a free downtown concert. We haven't landed on the act yet. We haven't secured the act. Last year was Counting Crows. The year before that it was Nelly.
Wow.
But you know it down here, man, on the Gulf Coast. I mean, they like to throw a party down here. So just like New Orleans, I know you spent a lot of time down there. Mobile likes to do the same thing.
No doubt. Love that Gulf Coast, man. One of the best areas in the country. I feel like the whole culture up and down I-10, just totally different deal. I want to go back, and so you were scouting for the Seahawks. Like I'm kind of like fascinated, and a lot of people are that are, I'm a casual NFL fan or football fan. I mean, I follow it, I gamble, all that. The scouting world is fascinating to me. Like, how did you get into that from like the start of your career?
Yeah, what's funny you bring that up. Like, people are fascinated by it. Hard Knocks has been a thing forever, right? Like, we've all been watching Hard Knocks since we were, since the early 2000s. They'd never done a Hard Knocks this year on the draft process until they did the one with the Giants, and that was like their most successful one they've had. Talking to the people that did it, we're actually in talks with the group that did that to do like a Senior Bowl version of Hard Knocks. But yeah, I got into it, man. It was the only thing I really wanted to do. I mean, growing up as a kid, my dad was a high school coach from the time I was a little kid, and I just became enamored with, obviously loved the sport, but just watching the draft on TV, something about the team building part of it just captured me more than like the coaching side. So from the time I was a little kid, I just had kind of tunnel vision on becoming an NFL scout. So, I feel really fortunate that I was able to, kind of land in the NFL. People used to ask me, like, who do you know? And I'm like, I don't know anyone. I got to go for it. So, I felt like I got lucky along the way and met the right people. My first break, my first job out of college was I did an internship with the Green Bay Packers, and it was during '96, the Brett Favre Super Bowl year. So it was really a cool year to be up there and part of that organization. And then at the time, we didn't know it then, but there were 6 future NFL GMs on that staff. So it's just like any walk of life, man. You get your foot in the door somewhere, you work hard, and you connect with the right people, you can take things pretty far. And I was lucky to be a part of a really good staff that year.
So, okay, well, thinking about it, you said you went to Seattle, and obviously Mike Holmgren was the head coach of that Green Bay team and went to Seattle. Is that kind of how you ended up going from Green Bay to Seattle, was through that connection?
No, it was their GM, John Schneider, was a young pro assistant, and there was he and a guy named Reggie McKenzie, who ended up being the GM of the Raiders for a while.
I remember him, yeah.
Reg and John shared an office together, and I would always go up there and bother those guys when I had some free time. And I'm this 22-year-old young punk out of college, and just trying to learn. And I'm forever indebted to those two guys for just letting me come in and sit in their office and learn from them. And then when John Schneider got a job with, at the time, the Washington Redskins, he was only like 29 years old, and he was the head of the football operation with Marty Schottenheimer as the coach. He hired me to scout the West Coast. That was my first break. That was my first like full-time road job. And then I went on to the Patriots and the Chiefs. Was in it for a long, long time, and then ended back up with John in Seattle when he was getting that thing going with Coach Carroll. And so I was there for 5 years, and then the Senior Bowl job came open. So that was kind of my track. But yeah, I owe a lot to John Schneider, man. He's been an incredible mentor to me, a great friend to me. He's great at what he does, and he's got a heck of a culture. It was a hard place to leave. Of all the places, like, they're just like any industry, like everyone talks, everyone knows like what teams are good to work for and what cultures and what GMs are great to work for. And John and the Seahawks was the best in the league. So it was hard to leave, but taking the Senior Bowl job, it was just a great opportunity at the time for me. It was kind of a family thing with my son, getting ready to play high school sports and stuff. I couldn't pass it up.
All right. Obviously, I know all about John Schneider and Pete Carroll and the Legion of Boom. Let's go back to that. So what years were you in Seattle? Were you part of scouting any of this Legion of Boom that was so legendary?
No, I got there the year after Pete and John got there, so I think they got there. I got there in 2012. I think they got there. I was there like a year or two after them. So, like I was in Kansas City. We had the fifth pick in the draft, and so we could have either taken Eric Berry or Earl Thomas. It would have worked out either way. Both those guys became great players, but so it was cool to end up with Earl. But yeah, like Sherm and Cam Chancellor, all those guys got there right before I got there. Same thing with Russell Wilson. We actually, in Kansas City, had a chance to draft Russell Wilson with the 75th pick. We didn't. We took an offensive tackle from Oklahoma, and Seattle took Russell Wilson with the very next pick 76. So when I got there, they kind of shared with me how much they were sweating it out that we were going to take Russell in Kansas City. Probably would have changed the fortunes of really changed that pick. Had we taken Russell because we liked Russell a lot in Kansas City, that would have changed the fortunes of the NFL. Those Seattle teams would have never happened. Patrick Mahomes in Kansas City never would have happened. So it's just crazy how those things work sometimes.
Yeah, it's like the ripples in the pond of life when the dominoes. Like I always think about the Sean Payton was trying to get Mahomes when Andy Reid popped up to 10 in 2017, and now here we are with the 2-6 New Orleans Saints. But anyway,
think about your Saints thing with when the Dolphins were either going to sign Drew Brees or Dante Culpepper, and
Brees failed the physical, and he failed the physical.
Yeah, and he ends up a Saints legend. So crazy.
Yeah, no. And then Saban would have ended up staying in Miami. It would have been Saban and Brees versus Brady and Belichick, and like the greatest rivalry ever if that would have happened. Yeah. And then Saban never ends up at Alabama, and the Bama thing never happened.
Crazy. Yeah. Well, we just unraveled NFL and college football for the last 20 years.
Yeah. I want to ask about your Patriots, Tom, because what years were you there during the dynasty?
Yeah, the start of it, 02 to 09. So, again, I got there right after the first Super Bowl. So, Tom was going into his third year, his second year as a starter, which was cool because I was with Tom at Michigan. He was a freshman when I was a senior. So, I was around the football program when Tom was recruited. And it was pretty cool to reconnect with him and obviously owe a ton to – I think everyone that was in that building owes a ton to Tom Brady in their careers. I mean, you look at some of these quarterback trees. You hear about, like, coaching trees. I always look at like what the quarterback trees are, not just in coaching and scouting. I mean, what some of these quarterbacks have done, the Brett Favres, just the ones I've been around, the Brett Favres, the Tom Brady's. I mean, you're going to look at Patrick Mahomes in 5 or 10 years, the tree that Patrick Mahomes is going to create is unbelievable. Yeah, those Patriot times were pretty special.
What was it like just being part of that organization during that time? Because you said you came the year after the first Super Bowl when they beat the Rams in 2001. They won back, they had 1 year off, and then they beat the Eagles and the Panthers back-to-back years. I mean, at that young point in your career, like, just what was it like even just being part of that organization?
Yeah, it's funny, Mince. Like, I had one of the guys that worked on that staff with me this morning, Marvin Allen, who's the assistant GM of the Dolphins now. I haven't heard from Marvin in a while, man. Like, we it's like anything. You fall out of touch with some people for a while, and I don't think I've talked to Marvin since last year's Senior Bowl, and he just texted me out of the blue this morning just to say what's up. And so we went back and forth just talking about how in the time we were all young guys and we didn't really appreciate what we were going through. Like, certainly we appreciated the winning, and you're going to Super Bowls and it was a great time, but I don't know if we appreciated, because we were all young. Like, you look at that staff in New England, the guys that became general managers just from that staff, there's like 5 or 6 GMs from that staff. Nick Caserio in Houston, Monty Austin-Fort with the Arizona Cardinals right now. John Robinson was the GM of the Tennessee Titans for a long time. So there were, Bob Quinn was the GM in Detroit. There was a bunch of guys, and so we were all just young bucks, like just trying to hustle and move up. And I don't think we took the time to really appreciate what a special group we had. But it was great, man. A lot of learning. Scott Pioli was a great guy to learn from. Bill Belichick was a great guy to learn from. So, and again, just being around the players and seeing that dynamic. I mean, you had so many alphas on that team. I mean, Tom gets a lot of the credit and everyone talks about Tom as they should, but you look at that team, I mean, some of the all-time greats and just like really alpha leaders on that team. You had Teddy Bruschi, you had Willie McGinnis, you had Junior Seau, Ty Law, Lawyer Malloy, Mike Vrabel.
Troy Brown and his band of renown.
Yeah, I mean, Troy started the slot receiver thing, man. Everyone talks about Welker and Edelman. They forget about Troy. Troy was the OG. So just some really cool players to be around in a great locker room, and just really learning how, as a scout, as a personnel guy, you're always drawing upon the teams you're around. So to be around the Green Bay team, then to go to New England, and then later in my career, 10 years later, to be with that Seattle team, the Legion of Boom guys, like, just some great takeaways, how to build a football team and how to build a locker room and what's important, what things you value. You really kind of build your own value system. So, again, just really fortunate to be around a lot of great players and great coaches in my career.
I'm curious. So, like you said, you were around Green Bay when they won the Super Bowl, New England the two, and then the Legion of Boom Seattle when they won one. Just culturally, you always see the New England like the do your job, like Belichick thing. Pete Carroll and John Schneider built that thing on competition. I mean, they go hard every day. They go hard in preseason. They try to win their preseason games. It's like a different – I'm just curious about, like, what were – you were around three and the Chiefs too, but, like, incredibly successful organizations. But it's like – I'm just curious, like, what was different about the way they ran them?
Yeah, that we played the bringing back bad memories. Someone asked me on a radio show the other day the worst loss I've ever been a part of, and the two were when I was with the Patriots, the undefeated Patriots team that lost on the David Tyree helmet catch. And then I was with Seattle when we lost on the Malcolm Butler interception that we would have been back-to-back. So some two bad losses, but, being in that Super Bowl against the Patriots when I was in Seattle, like you said, man, your stuff, Mintz. It was just about, you walked in the building in New England and the sign was do your job. I mean, it smacked you right in the face outside Coach Belichick's office. You open the door every day, do your job. People kind of check their personalities and egos at the door there. And it was really, it was a very business-like environment. I can say from like my time going into Tuscaloosa as a scout, and I spent a ton of time up there, living down here in Mobile and being in Tuscaloosa. The building was very similar to the building that Coach Saban had in Tuscaloosa. Whereas in Seattle, it was like chaos, like Coach Carroll zipping up and down the hallways on a scooter, and you got rap music blasting out of every office. Like, it was just so two completely different ways to do things. I mean, but you have to know like what your leadership is. And I think both buildings, the leaders were kind of true to who they were. So then the players kind of fall in line. Like there was no fakeness in either building. Bill was true to who he was and Scott, and then, John and Pete, and they both worked. Obviously that one year we ended up in the Super Bowl against each other. So there's not one way to do it. That's the thing I learned. I mean, you have to be true to yourself if you're in a leadership position, and then bring the people that fit that culture. And I think that's the thing that both those organizations did, and did very well. They found players that fit the culture, and the culture was completely different. Like, I'll just use one example. So as a scout in New England, when we went out to a school, you would have to ask the coaches and the people in the building, like, how much they could handle hard coaching. Because when we got the guys to New England, they were going to get plenty of hard coaching from our staff. Whereas in Seattle, Pete was very upbeat. It was, very positive. Like, that was the Dan Quinn, Pete Carroll, like everything was super positive. But what we had to ask there was, how are they going to handle it when their teammates get in their face? Because you had Cam, and you had Richard, and you had Doug Baldwin, and you had, Marshawn. You had some really strong alpha leaders on that team that they were the hard guys in that program. It wasn't so much the coaching staff. It was more what happens inside that locker room. So then we had to figure that out, right? Like, how does this guy handle his teammates coming after him? So it was completely different lines of questioning. And you knew that as a scout, like, you really had to drill down and make sure you got the right guys that fit your building.
I'm curious too. Well, there's so much I'm curious about here because it's such a fascinating world. But like, you look at like the Saints had this weird relationship where they just took Ohio State players all the time. The Eagles, what we've seen now with Kirby Smart in Georgia. Like, is there any kind of thing where scouts and pro teams are familiar with colleges' cultures and they just trust people coming out of certain colleges? Is that a real thing?
Yeah, I think it is. I think it is a real thing. Part of it towards the end of my time in New England, Coach Belichick had a really good relationship with Tony La Russa, and he would always go down to the state of Florida in the spring, like during pro day season when there was all the workouts are going on. And he wouldn't necessarily go to pro day. He would wait a couple days and then go into Gainesville or go into Coral Gables and work out the Miami guys by himself. So we were getting a lot of, players based out of Florida. But yeah, when you get, what's really helpful is when you get a couple good players out of a program like the Saints did with Ohio State, you hit on a couple of those guys. Then you can go to those players, and we would do it. I would do it a lot with, players that I scouted. And I would go to them and just ask about the guys that were left in the building after they left. Like, what is this kid like? Would he fit here? Now that you've been here in New Orleans and you see what this place is all about, who back at Ohio State would fit in this building, and who do you think would thrive in our culture? So, yeah, man, you lean on your players. You give your players some investment on the roster, right? Like, here's your time to say your piece. Like, you tell me, just because they're a good football player, like, don't pound the table for them. Like, they have to fit. You know what this building's about. So, yeah, I do think there's something to it. I think we're seeing it right now with the Georgia thing in Philly, like you talked about.
I'm curious, like, also scouting, the NFL evaluation process, so extensive, interviews, Wonderlic, all that stuff. I know certain teams are more likely to take risk on the character stuff. And, like, you look at New England, I mean, they kind of it seems like they tried to have a zero-tolerance policy most of the time. I mean, obviously, it's not always like that. What's that like as far as, like, how much do you risk on guys that are character questions versus high talent? Like, how do you judge that balance?
Yeah, you're right. Every team does it a little differently. To me, the biggest thing is, is teams, regardless of what they call it, most teams break character down into two parts, football character and personal character. So to me, it's way more important to have strong football character if you're going to build a good football team. Like, I'm not going to use specific examples. I know no reason to out some guys,
fair
but,
enough. Fair enough.
Yeah, no, but there's been players that, let's use an example. There's a defensive lineman on a team that I worked for once who he had a bunch of stuff in college, man. He had some positive weed tests. He had a DUI. Like, there was some easily Googleable stuff, right? And then you talk to people in the building, and yeah, the off the field stuff was it was, but he wasn't a bad person. He made some mistakes. He was a young guy, like immaturity, from a rough environment, kind of the product of where he came from, right? But he loved football, man. He was all about it. He was super tough, super competitive, held his teammates to a high standard, practiced his tail off every day. And so, like, his football character was like an A, but his personal character, because of some of the other stuff, was probably a C- or a D. And we drafted the player, and yeah, it took him a couple years. Like, we really needed to wrap our arms around the guy, and he needed some help from, like, a life skills perspective, but he wasn't a bad person. We knew once he matured out of some of that stuff, he was going to be fine. And he's still playing, man. He's had a great NFL career. He's been paid on numerous contracts because of the type of football guy he is. Like, it's hard to find leaders nowadays. You talk to NFL guys, what's getting harder and harder to find is leaders that aren't afraid to, like, step on people's toes. Like, this generation, I don't want to sound like the old guy who's, like, shouting from the front yard, but, like, a lot of the young guys coming up now, they want everyone to like them. And so when you can identify a guy that's really not worried about that, and it's more about winning than anything, winning above all else, and he doesn't care what guys in the locker room feel about him, like, those guys are hard to find. So some teams overpay when they find a guy like that. Like, we just need to get that guy in the locker room. Like, we'll give him a some more money in the contract just to get him, or draft him around higher just to get him. So yeah, man, that's kind of how the character thing breaks down, and you see it. I mean, there's just certain owners too. I think, like, what'll happen is before every draft, the GM will get, and this is every team. Every team, the GM and the owner get together, the day or two before the draft, and they go over the whole board and they talk about the character guys on the board, and then the owner basically says yes or no. Take him off the board or leave him on, and if he's there at a certain spot, I'm good with him. You taking him there with those issues. So I do think the owners are more involved right now when it comes to some of the character stuff than they were in the past.
How much does it matter? Because I think football is just such a unique sport where you just have to live it and breathe it. You see these guys that are super talented that just don't love football. Like, how much when you're evaluating it, they need to love football, right? I mean, I feel like you see a lot of guys that have all the talent in the world, but if they don't, like, love it, how much does that matter when you're evaluating guys?
Man, it's like we talk about the pre-draft process and what we do down here in Mobile for the teams. I think if you boiled it down, like if you'd asked every GM in the league, like what's the one thing you're trying to figure out through the process, it's who loves football, right? Like it's really easy. If you ask a kid if he loves football, most of them are going to say yes. You know, like not many people are going to sit in a job interview and tell the people that their future employer that they don't love to do what they're going to be asked to do. And that's a huge selling point for what we do here in Mobile at the Senior Bowl, quite honestly. Like I've had this conversation with agent after agent after agent. Like when our players come to Mobile, like they are making a statement, right? Like they're not afraid to compete. They love this. Like we had a couple guys in last year's game, Leatu Latu, he was the first defensive player drafted last year. The Colts took him with the 15th pick.
Yeah, you see
really good. Really good pass rusher out of UCLA. And then Taliesa Fuaga, your Saints first round pick out of Oregon
State.
State.
Hit on him. All the problems they have, it isn't him. They hit on him for sure.
He's going to be a really good one, and I had conversations with both those guys during the week, and they kind of went the same way. Both of them were like, Jim, how many people were telling me not to come play in the Senior Bowl? And I'm like, yeah, I bet a lot of people were. And they're like, you know what? Like there's nothing was going to keep me from coming here. Like I love football. I love to compete. I love to compete against the best. Like this has been a goal of mine. This is what I love to do. And what I tell the players at orientation every year is, guys, like you've made this statement, and it's not just about this year's draft. It's for 4 or 5 years from now, because most of these guys aren't going to make generational wealth off the first contract. Maybe a couple of those guys up in the top 10 will, like those guys get paid really well. But most of these guys need to hit a second contract to really take care of themselves and their families. And I said, this is going to come back on you in 4 or 5 years when teams are really digging in. Who loves football, right? Because it's human nature. When you again, you and I haven't been in that position. Well, I don't want to speak for you. I know I certainly haven't.
I carried a clipboard charting stats on the sideline in high school and call some high school play-by-play. That's about the extent of it.
I think it's normal when people get that level of wealth, maybe to like take their foot off the gas a little bit, or a level of success, maybe to take their foot off the gas. And when you're an NFL team, when you're an owner and a GM, and you're paying a guy $150 million to not just be the player that he was on the first contract, but all to be better, to continue to improve, like they got to love it, because I think by human nature, you get paid that kind of money, you are going to relax a little bit. At least most people would. So you're really looking for those guys. And again, to me, that's the guys that come here are making that statement, man. They love it. So that is, back to your question. I got long-winded on you, Mintz,
no, you're good.
But I think it does boil down to who loves it.
Looking back on your scouting career, were there any guys, obviously I don't know if you can name names, but any guys you were like really big on and went hard for that your teams ended up drafting that have successful careers?
Oh man. I've thought about this question a lot. For the teams I work for, it's a little hard to answer because it's such a group effort.
Okay.
By the time you draft a player, like sure, even if I was the area scout and I was the guy that was through Oxford 4 times that fall, and it was my job to like really know the guy and figure out the person, by the time you draft a man, between like area scout, national scout, college director, assistant GM, player personnel director, position coach, court, you know what I'm saying? Like there's like nine guys that have got a report in the system on the player. But in terms of the Senior Bowl, I'll pull it back to this game a little bit. Like there's a couple that have been really cool. We had a guy in the game a couple years ago, Quinn Miners, who was a Division III player at Wisconsin Whitewater. And I think that he's a great example of like, we're going to look high and low for the best players. And it doesn't matter what helmet you have. Like I said, we're getting ready we're starting these calls, today and through the rest of the week with the NFL teams. And really, I want their sign off on who to bring here. But Quinn was a weird case because it was during the COVID year. Division III football completely canceled. Like they just didn't even play that year. And so he was in Dallas training with Duke Manyweather, who's a big offensive line developer, coach, does a great job. And he had another guy there, Rayshawn Slater, who was an offensive lineman out of Northwestern. And Rayshawn actually opted out. The Big Ten played a season. They played an abbreviated year, but Rayshawn opted out. So Quinn and Rayshawn were in Dallas all fall, like training with Duke. And he would send me videos of those two guys training side by side. And, I was like, man, like Rayshon was our number one rated offensive lineman on our board. And then as the videos kept coming in through his agent, through Quinn's agent, I was like, man, this guy's looking better and better and better. And so when we did the calls with the teams, they were like, Jim, we think he's a free agent. And so I kind of went rogue that year and brought Quinn anyway, because I just felt like he deserved it. And I kind of saw something in these videos, and give his agent, Ron Slavin, a lot of credit for sending me the videos. But long story short, Quinn comes down to Mobile and kicks ass all week and becomes a third-round pick to the Denver Broncos. And then just this past offseason, he signed one of the richest offensive line deals in the NFL. So that's the kind of stuff that I love about
that is a cool story. No, that is cool.
This is the dude that during Senior Bowl week, he had his belly hanging out his jersey all week. And, Daniel Jeremiah on the NFL Network kind of promoted him all week. But, that's life-changing for this kid, man. Like, he doesn't get this platform. Who knows what happens to him? And he's just an awesome dude, man. He's, like, from up by Canada, and he's got these crazy training videos of him out in the woods. And I just love the guy, man. So, like, those are some fun stories.
That's awesome. So now you, like you said, you're working on next year. Like, what is your Saturday? Do you watch college football on Saturdays? Like, how does your Saturday work?
Yeah, I'm usually at a game.
Okay.
I try to get to a game every Saturday. As a staff, we're at probably 12 to 15 games every weekend. And if you follow me, for people that do follow me over the last 7 years, a big thing we've like kind of become our trademark is our scouts will be out at the games and they will take videos of the guys during pregame. So like if we were in an Ole Miss game, we'd go over to the D-line group, right? And Walter Nolan and Princely and J.J. Pegues and, Jared Ivey, all these guys. Our scouts have their phone out and they'll be taking videos of these guys, like up-close videos as they're going through. And then they text them to me, and then I post them every Saturday with a little scouting report. It's really kind of recruiting for us, because we tag the players and then they get back to their locker after the game and shoot, the Senior Bowl was looking at me today. So it serves two purposes. It kind of pulls back the curtain of our operation and what we're trying to do here so the fans can follow along and see it. But it's also a little bit of recruiting as well. So that's all I'm doing on Saturday. Even if I'm at a game, like I'll be in the press box at a game at Auburn or something, and I'll have videos coming in from the West Coast, and I'm up there trying to, tweet and get that stuff out. But so Saturdays are pretty hectic, but it's college football, man. So no complaints. I love it.
Yeah. So you tweet it out yourself? Do you have somebody running the Senior Bowl social, or you just do it yourself?
I do it myself.
Love it. One man operation.
Kind of a control freak that way, man.
Oh man. Well, hey, you're controlling your own brand and building it. Only got a couple more, but so you did all the scouting in Seattle, and then the Senior Bowl thing came open. Like, how did that come about?
Yeah, so Mobile's not a huge community. Like, people know people, and the job came open. Phil Savage, my predecessor, did a great job here. He was the GM.
Oh, Ravens, wasn't he a Ravens guy too back in the day?
Yeah, yep, yeah. He cut his teeth in the Ravens organization, got the Browns GM job, and Phil and I are good friends to this day. He did an unbelievable job here. And then when I heard he was leaving, he and I connected on it. And I just asked him about the job and what his thoughts on it were. And then I called John Schneider. Like I said, I think my son was in 8th grade. And he was getting ready to play high school football and basketball and all that stuff. And my daughter was in 4th grade at the time. And one thing you don't get back in the NFL scouting, like it is a really cool thing. And it's awesome that you're curious about it, and a lot of people are curious about it, and nobody feels sorry for scouts, but it is a hard profession, man. I mean, it's a very cool job, but it's a very hard job, especially on a family. So like you're on the road 175, 200 nights out of the year. And I just knew that this was time I wasn't going to get back with my kids. Like I just didn't, I didn't want to regret that. And it was a really unique opportunity for me to continue to do what I love to do. And that's evaluate players. But then still be here for my family. So that's kind of how it went down. I called John Schneider and I was like, hey dude, I gotta go for this job, don't I? And he was like, you're damn right you do. So go for it. So I feel fortunate. I mean, I'm from Michigan. I'm a Yankee down here in the South. I'm shocked they hired me for the job in the first place. I mean, I know a Yankee has never run this game before. So But it's been a lot of fun, man. I truly feel blessed that I've had these last 7 years.
Awesome. Well, look, this was fun as heck, man. I appreciate you giving us 40 minutes this morning. Follow Jim on Twitter at Jim Nagy _SB. Follow at the Reese's Senior Bowl. I mean, I've already heard enough. I'm coming this year. You got it, dude. Mobile. And it'll be fun because that's the week before Mobile, right by Nola. The Super Bowl week's right behind it. So it's
yeah, man. You come down here. You got a 2-hour drive to hook up to the Super Bowl, and we'll roll out the red carpet for you, man. Seriously, let's connect, and we'll make sure you get set up. If you want,
I'm in. We'll do video log. We'll do content. We'll do it all. I've heard enough.
Sweet. All right, man. Good deal. Appreciate you having me on, man.
Thank you so much. Fun. Thanks so much, Jim. Follow Senior Bowl, and man, that was just. God, that was so cool. I learned so much. I love that. I just feel like I learned so much this morning. It's great. Thanks again to Jim. Tyler Moody going to join us here in a second. World Series. Yankees down 3-0 now. I'm going to wait till this pops up with Moody to talk a little bit about the World Series. Looking back on it, though, man, that Game 1 when Freddie Freeman hit the walk-off grand slam in the 10th. You know, Moody and I talked about it last week, how important it was for the Yankees to win Game 1 with Garrett Cole pitching, and they had a lead in the 8th and kind of blew it on that ball. They got thrown away on the Ohtani double when he got to third. They got a sac fly, and now the Dodgers, they win in the Yankee Stadium. Freddie Freeman had another bomb last night. Now, I mean, it's so crazy. You think about the Yankees and getting back to the World Series and everything that went with that. They haven't been there since 2009, and now they're just down 3-0. It's basically over. It's so crazy how quick that happened. But Moody's saying this, and he was saying to me off the air, the National League, he said he would have taken any National League team over the American League and the Yankees this year because the Yankees had such an easy path with the Royals and the Guardians, and you just looked at the NL and how much tougher it was with the Dodgers, Mets, Padres, and everybody that came out of that. And that ended up being a true thing. I'm curious. Now we're joined by Tyler Moody. What's up, Moody? How are you? Shout this morning.
What's up, man? Hey, that was a great interview with Jim. I mean, that was incredible stuff. It's cool to go inside the mind of a scout like that, especially someone that's so connected on so many different levels. I thought that was one of the better interviews that we've had recently.
I definitely do too, and that's a world that, I'm a gambler. I watch a ton of football. I do fantasy, all that. That's a world I don't know at all. And it's a fascinating world, but it's kind of like one of those things where, how do you even get into scouting? It's like, it seems like a fun job, but like you talked about, he got that internship with Green Bay out of Michigan. How do you even get that internship? That's always just such a weird one to get into.
No, it was very cool. He had me sitting there thinking, I wish I would have gone back and, tried to find my way into baseball that way. Because it's I think it's one of the dreams, especially when you're managing fantasy teams and stuff. You're like, man, I wish I could do this. Try it one time and see if I could be good at it on, that type of level. So, I don't know. I thought that was one of the coolest interviews that we've had, honestly.
I did too. And I appreciate Jim coming on. Talking some World Series here. Dude, we just blinked and it's over.
Well, maybe, but more than likely, yeah.
And you said it before when we talked about Game 1 before Friday. I mentioned that a second ago. When Garrett Cole was pitching Game 1, we were like, look, if this is going to be a series, the Yankees got to win this Game 1 with Cole. And they had the lead in the 8th. They booted that ball on the Ohtani double that got him to third with one out, and that sac fly tied it. That might be, when you look back, the key play of the series. Freeman at the walk-off grand slam, and then the Dodgers got momentum off that. They win Game 2, 4-2, and then last night, Freeman hit the bomb early, and they controlled the game the whole way, and all of a sudden you look up, it's 3-0. I mean, what happened?
By the way, Freddie Freeman, one of the good guys in baseball. I'm so happy for him because this is a guy that has done nothing but play the game the correct way. He was injured for the last month, has been really awful. Hadn't homered in the last month, and now he's homered in all 3 games of the World Series. I don't think anyone in Major League Baseball deserves it more than Freddie Freeman. He's that guy, and so I'm happy to see that for him. But as far as the series is concerned, this is kind of what we expected. We talked about it. The Yankees had to have Game 1. It was so imperative with Garrett Cole on the mound that if they did not win in Game 1, there was a chance that this thing could snowball very quickly because of how deep and how good this Dodgers team is. And this is exactly what's happened. I mean, I do think the Yankees have a chance tonight. Luis Hill is good, but, the Dodgers have taken command of this series, and we mentioned this as well. I thought that no matter which team came out of the NL, any of the teams, the Braves, the Phillies, the Mets, did not matter. Any of those teams would beat the Yankees in the World Series because the Yankees are not really that good. They just happen to have one of the best routes to a World Series any team has ever had. They took advantage. They did their thing, but now they've run into some high-caliber teams, and they're getting rolled, kind of like we expected.
Well, yeah, like we said, the Yankees are in a mess, but luckily we've got the thing that cures the mess. Dude wipes. Let it rip with Dude wipes. The Yankees better let it rip down 3-0. One use of Dude wipes will change your life. Target, Amazon, Walmart, nationwide. And hey, it's Halloween week. Get the Dumpkin Spice Dude wipes. Amazing products. And as always, pounded with Stella Blue. Check out DraftKings King of the Court promotions. Only got, I believe, 2 more nights left. They've been giving away $1 million. You make a bet. You opt in. And you make a bet on whoever's going to lead the, just any kind of points props bet if you pick the guy who leads the NBA in points, rebounds, and assists, you get all split free plays. I mean, one of Moody and I's good friends, last minute Saturday night, forgot to place a bet on the King of the Court thing, and there was 1 game left, so he just hit LeBron James just because he needed to do it. LeBron ends up leading it Saturday night, and everybody that had LeBron got $1,570 freaking dollars in free plays from DraftKings. And my dumb ass forgot to do it, and he called me Sunday like, man, I almost forgot I got this. I'm running so good, and I'm just like, man, I'm an idiot. But congrats, but I'm happy for him. But last night was
awesome.
Last night was
I
Paulo
tried to do
Banchero.
my first one last night.
Last night was Paulo Banchero went just nuclear in the first half. Everybody that had him, I believe, got like over $300 in free play. So make sure you don't miss it. Opt in on DraftKings. Only a couple nights left of the King of the Court promotion. And then shout out DraftKings too, man. Like, we've got your boosted parlay bets on, Monday night, Thursday night, Sunday night, all primetime games. I hit a fun one this weekend where I had Jameis over 300, over in Ravens-Browns, and David Njoku touchdown at 19-1. But look, if you're a recreational gambler, this stuff is so much fun because you can do, it's like a $10 bet, but you get the boost. And you can put together 20, 30, 50 to 1 off $10. You can win 200, 300, 500 bucks, and you can find entertainment in the game for $10. It's just all about gambling responsibly and fun. But shout out DraftKings for allowing that to be possible. It's great. It's cool.
It's just good to have a sweat on things you normally wouldn't have a sweat on. Because I'm not interested in the NBA anymore. But last night I took Wembanyama as my king of the court. Obviously he didn't win, but it was the first time that I've cared about a Spurs game in since I was actually watching basketball when Dirk Nowitzki was playing. So, I don't know. That's the great thing about gambling. It'll give us sweats and spots we would normally not care. And, that's, in my opinion, that's the best thing about gambling.
Yeah, no, but I just love those little, the props and the in-game parlays where you can, you can risk $5 or $10 and you can win 100, 200. You get to watch a game, you buy entertainment for $10. And what if you hit? I hit a freaking, the Cowboys-Steelers Sunday night one. I hit a 10 to win 675 when the Cowboys beat the Steelers. I don't know. Yeah, I just love that stuff. And shout out DraftKings, shout out Stella Blue, shout out Dude Wipes. Awesome interview, though, with Jim Nagy. One of my favorites we've ever done. Moody, tonight, any thoughts on this game 4 of the World Series before we get out of here?
Well, we talked about it. We thought that the Yankees had to have Game 1 and Game 4. I thought Luis Hill was a guy that was going to step up in this series. We'll see if he does tonight. I kind of like the Yankees tonight, but at the same time, it's like, dude, this thing is snowballing quickly. The Dodgers they have taken pure command of this series, so I wouldn't be surprised to see them close it out either. But my initial gut reaction was like, this is the bullpen game for the Dodgers. It's always difficult for a bullpen to be good all the way through. Like if one person slips up, that could lead to a big inning for the Yankees. So I kind of like the Yankees tonight to extend the series to a Game 5. Then I think the Dodgers wrap this thing up potentially. We may make it to 6. There's a chance of Garrett Cole back on the mound. He shows up at home and pushes it to Game 6. Obviously tonight is imperative for the Yankees to even get there. I like Luis Hill. I think he shows up. I do think the Yankees have a chance tonight, though, but he has to be magnificent against this great Dodgers lineup. So I lean Yankees slightly, but I don't love it because of how the Dodgers are playing.
Yeah, that Game 3 last night just felt so deflating. Because, it's kind of one of those things. It's like, well, the series doesn't really start till a team wins on the road. But when you're down 2-0, you have to win Game 3 to get back in. And when you lose like they did, only one team ever come back from 3-0 was that Red Sox against the Yankees in the 0-4 ALCS. The odds
and that's not happening here. Look, I do think the Yankees could extend this to 6. They have 2 good pitchers going the next 2 games to get it to 6, but there's just no way. There is a 0.001% chance the Yankees get this done, but that's it. I just don't see this Dodgers team slipping up. This is the kind of team that shows up prepared every single day. They don't get too high, don't get too low, and they have so many superstars across the board that someone is going to carry them if everybody else is kind of dropping the ball that day. So you have to have just the utmost confidence in the Dodgers right now. I do think the Yankees are going to extend it, but the Dodgers are going to get it done. It's when we said that from the jump,
Awesome. Well, ultimately, thanks to Jim Nagy. Follow the Reese's Senior Bowl. Like I said, I mean, one of the most fun interviews, most in-depth we've ever done. And loved having him on. Always great to catch up with Moody. We'll be back tomorrow. Let's have a day. Let's enjoy this 80-degree weather in Chicago in late October. What is happening?